What's up, Zox fam? We're back with some more Etheria Restart. Now, I got my very first Codex of Magic on Swift Rush and Swift Smite. And the craziest thing about this is that I finally feel like this is now going to allow me to shift into true endgame. Because when we're talking about really having the builds, having the requirements to be able to get your runs to be more consistent, it's not just lattice investment. And I want to be 100% transparent with you guys on what the things are that are required for you to really build towards more of those consistent runs. Because a lot of the runs I've been seeing is like, hey, do the speed clear or try the speed clear. But I also realized that that's a pitfall for a lot of players that are trying to build up units, but they don't necessarily have the pieces of the puzzle or really honestly the tools to make those units work fully so that they can get those clears in the way that they're seeing them being depicted, right? So I want to talk to those points. And this isn't just about the things like shell dungeons or module dungeons. You have to remember, the more content you can clear in this game, the more resources you'll have, the more you can build. And that's ultimately what's going to allow you to be able to do better in PvP, clear more PvE, and just overall be able to, like I said, just accumulate more resources at the end of the day. Now, one of the very first things is that what I noticed had to kind of shift for me mentally, and this was just something I had to do personally, was the just making do mentality. Because I noticed that that really wasn't helping me progress, because what I was running into where there were like kind of gaps in like the abilities that I might have had coming from a certain character. So let's take this, for example, like Klaus, right? So for a really long time, I was just running her at a level 3 on her skill 3 because I was just like, well, that's all I need. Just land that hacking in progress. I didn't realize how impactful that like cooldown reduction would be, right? Now, the thing is that once I got that investment, it wasn't the last thing in order to ensure that I'm getting the most out of this character. And there's still even more I can pull out of this character. One thing I had to actually adjust for things like, for example, Rengoku, was actually equipping her on things like, for example, Dark Moon. Now, the thing is that what Dark Moon is doing is it's actually going to damage the target with the highest attack and extend the duration of non-control debuffs. Now, the thing about this is that me being able to extend my skill 3, for example, which is defense down and speed down, it's a couple of different things that this is going to be benefiting me. And then this also will extend hacking in progress, by the way. But this is going to allow me to be able to make sure that I'm allowing my DPS to have more of an opportunity or a bigger window for them to deal the respective damage that I need them to do when I'm trying to do certain setups. And this is actually a really big component when you're trying to do like some of those speed clears for like Rengoku, for example, and using a character like Klaus. Things that can tremendously help is having a character or a shell, I should say, that's going to allow you to be able to extend those windows, right? Now, this can also be something that can apply to like buffs, for example. Characters that can extend buff duration end up being extremely powerful as well. You got characters that can extend debuffs, like for example, RC77. But the problem you run into though is that those characters might not necessarily fit these specific 4-man comps that you're trying to do. So again, a alternative or a thing that is a actual tangible variable would be things like these shells that I would say like things like Dark Moon don't really get emphasized or really talked about too much because again, it doesn't really offer much value in a lot of other places. Whereas for some people, I'm not going to say they don't use them, but they're not the predominant shells that are being talked about for these specific reasons. Now, the other thing is too, is like I said before, I was making that kind of like just make do investments, right? When you're looking at SSRs, and what I'm really coming to terms with is that SSRs truly have to be invested. Like it is so much of an investment, in fact, that I'm realizing that that's what we're missing. And that's why we feel like there's like the lackluster of like the utility or even some gaps in some of these characters. Because even when I was looking at characters like, say, for example, Klaus, I was looking at that hack in, right? Like, and like how much damage I'm taking even when I have the hack in progress fully on, and then like looking at the fact that this skill 1 gives another 5%, and 5% might not sound like much, but that actually can make a big difference in the consistency of a run, how much damage I'm taking on and whether or not I survive that second hit from that stupid ad in Rengoku, right? So these are things that are going to allow you to further clean up your runs, right? And this is, again, even just like the chance of being able to inflict your hacking in progress if you go into the skill 2, the chance of that turn meter still. There's a lot of different factors as to why some of the faster clears or setups don't work the way that you want them to. Like, for example, this is a big component. If one of these things don't happen, it can drastically change the outcome of the run, right? So, for example, if you don't land the defense break, that can literally change how much damage you're doing, which means now you're in the fight longer, which then could result in your team's demise. Or if we go into the skill 2, and let's say, for example, Klaus doesn't actually redistribute properly, that can lead to your team's demise, right? And even if it's just the placement of the skill 1, and like I said, it can vary on whether or not you actually landed or not, that can lead to your team's demise. There's so many different factors that can kind of come into play, which I wasn't really like too aware of until I started actually farming Rengoku a lot more, and I was seeing inconsistencies in my runs. And then I would go back and I would watch some, or I would start watching it and I'm just like, wow, she didn't land a defense break there. Or wow, that turn rotation, she didn't actually turn meter still the same way. So now here we are. I'm getting like hit by an ad that in the last run where I got the success, I didn't actually get hit by that ad that time, right? So there's a lot that kind of goes into this idea of investment, what you have accessible to what is actually truly required to get that character to work. So yes, the character can work, but it is only going to have a much higher, like I would say, increase in the anomaly runs that you're going to have versus when they have more investment in them, right? So I just think that understanding that is going to really put a lot more into perspective as to why when you are investing in characters that you have the ability to fully invest in, like, for example, say those that are like just completely avoiding investing in Vice, for example, you're just making a big mistake because that character, you're able to get the full extent of the value out of them. And yes, the run may be slower, but it's going to be more consistent. And that's the thing that I think a lot of players are missing, is that they're trying to go for these faster clears because, oh, it's going to take less time. But if you're in that loop where you're not actually doing anything or the runs keep failing, then technically you're not progressing at all anyway, right? So that's kind of a thing. I can give you guys another example. Ling Lo is another character. Night and day on whether or not, and this is why I said duration is so important, whether or not you have that level 5 on increasing the duration of the Well Prayer to 2 turns is literally game changing for this character. And here's why. Because I noticed that a lot of the times what will be emphasized is, oh, you know, have this shell, have this modules, this will work, right? But the duration of something matters a lot, because let's say, for example, you have Well Prayer applied at 1 turn and you're going first. And then let's say, okay, you take your turns. After that turn, Well Prayer is no longer on you. So 2-turn Well Prayer actually is going to allow you to rotate into another turn so that you can actually take advantage of it, right? Because 1-turn Well Prayer is actually intended for players that are running slow, right? So that's the thing. It's not intended for you to be running fast with 1-turn Well Prayer, because it only lasts for 1 turn. And if that's something that you're not really recognizing, you're going to run into more inconsistent runs, right? And so this is something that, like, ultimately, like, as I'm playing around with different setups, guys, and this isn't just coming from me just saying this with just this one setup. Dude, I've gone the extra mile of, for example, I've 6-starred Sonya and 5 out of 5 out of 5'd her. Right? Like, I did all this stuff within the last couple of days, 5 out of 5 Rin, 5 out of 5 out of 5 Rin, and testing her out and running her in different setups. Obviously, we got more investment in Valerian, like all the different units that can work in there. I've been testing these things out and just kind of looking at what are the variables that are being, that you can actually like change or you can work on versus the ones that you just kind of can't, right? And another thing that I think is really important is the idea of using certain units together in things like, say, for example, Rengoku. The gimmick there is that you don't want to have units that are stacking the same element because, again, if you have Rengoku retaliate, he's hitting both of those units of the same element. They also build up the counter, like the hit counter, much quicker because they're the same element. So these are things that you have to kind of factor in as well. But in conjunction to what I would say is starting to push you into what I would consider to be true endgame, it's the level 50ing and 6-starring characters. This is one thing that I would see. I've had a few people like send me their comps, and then I'll see their team. They're like, oh, my Rengoku isn't consistent or it's not clearing. And then when I look at the units aren't even level 50 and they're not 6-starred, or they're not even 6-starred, right? And I would say that base stat, it's like we think about base stat in terms of speed, but base stat HP, base stat defense, and even base stat attack for damage dealers, which I think is an obvious one, is going to be game changing, right? Like whether or not you can take the hit and not die. I would even argue like if you get hit to the point where when Rengoku hits your team and say like he AoEs and you get dropped to 25% of your HP, there's a high probability that next follow-up coming from the ad will kill you, right? And this is where having the bulk, the ability to rotate quick, there's a lot of different elements that kind of go into it, but if you don't actually have all those components, then you just kind of lose, right? Like eventually the enemy has to go. And even with like having setups, like for example, I've done the Rengoku fight with just a taunt setup, you're eventually going to have a window where there's nothing there, right? And now you have to deal with the fact that everybody's susceptible to get clapped. And so there's just a lot that you have to kind of factor into the success of your teams. Now, another component that I noticed that a lot of players aren't talking about, and what I feel like is really, really important, even from like, even what I feel like more CCs need to be more transparent on and sharing, is that truly, honestly, getting these clears to be more consistent is actually going to require you to do a lot of runs with some of those inconsistency fails, especially if you don't want to use some of the more slower teams. You're going to have to actually get some of those shells like the Codex of Magics, the Fortissimos, the everything that comes from Rengoku with the third matrix bonus. And I would even argue that at this point, most things require you to have the third matrix bonus. Why? Because the third matrix bonus is going to open up how many sets you can do, right? Number two is that it's going to come with a higher base speed, right? That's the most important thing when we're talking about team rotations and most of your supports that you're trying to get to run quicker. So we even look at a lot of my team comps, right? Now I have on average a lot of my units running at like a 144. If we look at my Ling Lo, she's at 139. These aren't crazy speed tunes. Now I will say, I even got the craziest speed build now on my Lily. That'll be a whole nother video, but, and it's not this one that I'm showing right now, but you'll notice that this is all possible because I'm utilizing that third matrix bonus. Now, if you aren't using that third matrix bonus, that means that you need to roll innately higher speeds. But as you can see here, I even rolled this piece that has a plus 15, which is kind of crazy. But with that, that's something that like is going to make or break a lot of the setups that you're trying to do. Because the other thing is too, is that with those speed increases, it also will come with another value. So like on running Swiss Smite on my class, it's also allowing me to have that opportunity to keep my accuracy over that 200% threshold, which we know is required in order for you to actually land anything, right? So there's so much that actually comes with the investment load, right? And what is actually going to make your runs more consistent or make your team comps work. It's not just have these units and they just work. I feel like a lot of the times when you try to invest in these higher quality teams, it comes with the price of investment. And when you don't have the proper investment, it's going to lead you to more unsuccessful runs, which is going to lead you to feeling like you didn't actually do anything because you didn't do anything. You failed more runs than you actually completed. Now, the other thing is like I said, I know there's some players that are wondering like, dude, when I do my auto fights, I sometimes will check it. And then there's like this, it'll be like a super inconsistent amount of like completions, right? And like I said, it's because of all the different anomalies of the fight. Like one thing I will say about Rengoku that's a little interesting is that it doesn't actually seem to have a specific targeting. Like for example, that first ad that silences, there's no specific person that it targets. Like I have tried adjusting HP, attack, speeds, and doesn't really seem to have a specific like thing that like will kind of flux who it targets, which makes it kind of hard to gauge what to specifically do other than like just being prepared to either cleanse it or being fast enough and having certain characters get off certain abilities. So then whoever does get silenced, you don't have to worry about like DPS missing out on damage, etc. Right? Like, so just a lot of different things that you can do. But one of the last things I would say I want to leave you guys with is that there is no in between. right? I think that that's one thing that I realize a lot of players are running into an issue with is that they think that there's an in between and there isn't, right? There's either you're going fast or you're going slow. Trying to be in between is going to lead you to not clearing anything. Right. And that's just in all honesty. Most of this in-game stuff either is you're extremely fast and you have the necessary investment, bare minimum to make it work, or you go for the slower comps with the like teams that you can get more investment in, even if they're lower valued or lower rarity units, because you're able to get more investment into those characters, but you're still able to get the more consistent clear. So yeah, that's basically what I wanted to talk about in this, because I feel like, again, there's just like this idea of I'm just going to shift into in-game, or I should be able to do X thing. But I noticed, and this is just all in pertaining to what the current state of things are, you have to have that investment. Otherwise, the inconsistency is just going to be there. And like I said, I think that for a lot of players, if you don't have the necessary things to make team comps work at the higher spectrum for the speed clears, like if you don't have the speeds, don't just go and build that team, right? Point in case, right? And I just want to show you guys something. If we go and we look at a Rengoku team, and people will probably go and look at rankings, and let's go to auto only, right? Now, if we look at this team, it has a Lilium, it has a Lily, a Dinah, and a Kazuyo on it. Let's look at what the team like requirement is. Oh, wow. It is an Alicorn with a 181 plus a 181 on a Lily, right? 3 matrix bonuses, right? Then if we go over to the Lilium, it's a triple matrix bonus. What is this called? Count. Right? On a Fury Edge, almost 100% crit rate, because again, you don't want that to even be at 90% because that will create anomalies for you in your runs. The 75 speed is to make sure that she's able to actually rotate properly. I'm almost guaranteeing everybody's at a really high speed here. So it's going to allow her to actually be able to rotate properly with the rest of the team and not actually cut and still take advantage of the defense breaks and even the sleep amp. And then the 219 crit damage plus the crit damage buff that you're getting from Lily is going to have her closer to that almost 350 range, which means she hits like a truck. And then she's maxed invested. And then when we look at the Dinah here, the Dinah on the Ether Plague, right? In Ether Plague, granted, it's not active, but what they're getting from here is that speed, right? So Shadow Dash, 19. 169 on the speed, which makes her extremely fast. And then, of course, the effect accuracy. Granted, she doesn't have any skill investment, but you can make that happen when you have plus 169 and 200 plus effect accuracy on this character. And then for the very last character, which is the Kazuyo, you'll see a 159 with 219 effect accuracy with skill 5, a skill 5 on the skill 1 and the skill 3, right? And this is just one of the setups. A lot of the setups are like this, though, right? Especially as people are building towards more consistency and faster clears. And these are the things that, again, you just have to be aware of. Like I said, there really isn't an in-between. It's either you do it fast or you do it slow. And that's one of the things that I feel like is going to ultimately allow players to clear more content. If you have the tools necessary, go for it. But if not, don't dig that hole for yourself where now you're stuck. So yeah, guys, that's going to be basically that for this one. Let me know how you guys feel. Like, do you feel like there's some things that they need to adjust? Do you still feel like Rengoku needs to be nerfed? I've been seeing that quite a bit. But yeah, guys, let me know in the comment section down below. That's going to be that with this one. Everyone, stay blessed, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.